In doing research for part 2 in this series, I was planning to make mention of the very large yachts that were built in the 1920s and the 1930s. And as I got into it, it turns out that we're going to have to spend a little bit more time on this era because it is extremely interesting. This is almost 100 years ago, and American and European yachtsmen were building vessels over 200 feet that were absolutely stunning and spectacular. The parallels are very interesting. At that time, there was a class of very wealthy individuals who paid virtually no taxes, who had almost unlimited amounts of money, which they could do anything with. And in some sense, they were competing with each other in building these yachts and going on these expeditions. And it's not all that dissimilar, perhaps, from this sudden space race between Branson and Bezos and billionaires trying to establish themselves as the ultimate adventurers. So let's have a look at the Vanderbilts, the Astors, and certain European vessels that were built during this epic period between the wars. Just prior to the stock market crash of 1929, a staggering number of very large mega yachts were ordered from the top shipyards of the world. First of this generation was the 263-foot Norma Hull, ordered by 34-year-old Vincent Astor from the Krupp shipyard in Germany. The Norma Hull stands up well next to any of the newer yachts today, with a maximum cruising speed of 13.7 knots from her 3,200 horsepower, delivering a range of 12,700 miles. However, economy cruising at 8 knots could achieve a 23,500 mile range. And yes, batteries were also an important item on yachts in the 1920s and 30s, as evidenced by this ad for batteries aboard the yacht Norma Hull. In 1930, the 262-foot Reveler was delivered to the Russell Alger family. He was a lumber baron and a vice president at Packard Motor Cars. She has been rebuilt and renamed many times, and some of you may recognize her now as the charter yacht Talitha G. The 300-foot Nollan was built in the UK and delivered in 1930 to Lady Ewell, who was known to be a big game hunter, a horse breeder, and a film financier. She and her daughter enjoyed a cruise to Miami, New Zealand, and Australia before she sold it on the eve of World War II to King Carol II of Romania. Yacht broker Nicholas Edmiston rescued her from the Danube in 1998, where she was being used as a floating restaurant. Lovingly restored at Blumenvoss, she is now back in full service. That same year, banker J.P. Morgan launched his fourth Corsair, the 343-foot yacht, at Bath Iron Works in Maine, at a cost of $2.5 million. Morgan preferred sleek and dark-hulled yachts that could attain speeds of 19 or 20 knots. This was achieved by steam turbine generators that drove motors delivering over 6,000 horsepower. After service in World War II, the vessel was converted into a luxury cruise ship with 42 staterooms. But in 1949, the ill-fated vessel struck a rock in Acapulco and started to sink. The captain decided to beach her. All passengers and crew were able to get off with no loss of life, but the vessel was abandoned. In 1931, the Royal Yacht Danneberg, 257 feet, was delivered to Queen Alexandrina. Krupp delivered this 232-footer to American banker Charles Stone, who somehow still had a lot of money after the crash. William K. Vanderbilt ordered this 274-foot yacht while he was circumnavigating the globe on his previous yacht. Vanderbilt was actually a former naval officer and commanded his own vessels with an unlimited master's license. And that brings us to this extraordinary 360-foot yacht built by Krupp for Marjorie Merriweather Post and her banker husband E.F. Hutton in 1931. Like many of these vessels, Sea Cloud went into military service during World War II, first for the Coast Guard and later for the U.S. Navy. And today she is back in service, fully restored as a very swanky cruise ship. The largest yacht delivered in 1931 was the 446-foot Savarona from Bloemen Voss, delivered to Mrs. Cadwallader, and legend has it that this lady, who had owned a series of yachts, ordered this one over the telephone. In 1938, with war looming, she sold the vessel to the Turkish government to serve as the presidential yacht for Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Let's do a price check on yachts at that time. Mrs. Cadwallader paid $4 million for Savarona, which would be $87 million today. The replacement cost for this vessel would probably be about $446 million. In 1930 and 31, as America entered the Great Depression, over half a mile of new mega yachts were delivered. The replacement cost today would probably be about $2 billion. In looking at how these yachts were used, it becomes clear that their mission included global exploration and expedition. Two interesting examples are the Astor and Vanderbilt yachts, which were built by the heirs to the robber baron fortunes, who often competed with each other. Again, much in the same way that the billionaires are now trying to be pioneers in space. Vincent Astor became a yacht owner at the age of 20 when his father died while returning from a honeymoon in Europe with his 18-year-old wife aboard the ill-fated Titanic. After the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, Vincent loaned Noma to the U.S. Navy and served aboard the vessel as a junior officer. Re-outfitted with heavy guns and depth charges, the Noma is credited with a number of attacks on German U-boats. The star on the forward stack denotes a U-boat sunk by the Noma. And so Vincent Astor was an experienced naval officer when he had the Norma Hull designed and ordered it built at the Krupp shipyard in Germany, which likely was the shipyard that built most of the German warships that he was hunting during World War I. In the 1930s, Vincent made 4 scientific expeditions to the Galapagos Islands, bringing back a number of specimens, things like penguins, tortoises, iguanas, and a large botanical collection that is now housed at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The Norma Hull was in Miami in 1933 between trips to the Galapagos when Franklin D. Roosevelt was delivering a speech in Bayfront Park. At fairly close range, this fellow emptied his revolver at the president, but missed. President Roosevelt was invited by his childhood friend Vincent Astor to seek refuge aboard the Norma Hull. That summer, Vincent Astor picked up President Roosevelt at his Hyde Park estate on the Hudson. The Norma Hull took the two men to Montauk. The Norma Hull was trailed by 2 U.S. Navy destroyers as escorts and flew the official presidential flag, so FDR could spend the day fishing, which he loved to do. For Roosevelt, Norma Hull was now the presidential yacht. As commander-in-chief, he would summon naval officers to the Norma Hull for meetings. He watched the America's Cup races from the upper deck of the Norma Hull, and during a fishing trip to the Bahamas, he entertained the Duke and Duchess of Kent and had diplomatic meetings with the governor. And when war broke out, as he had done with Noma in the First World War, Vincent lent his yacht Norma Hull to the U.S. military. Vincent was called to active duty with the rank of commander, and he coordinated merchant convoys leaving New York to support the war in Europe. Norma Hull remained in government service until she was laid up in the reserve fleet and finally sold to a scrapper in Maine in 1964. Not to be outdone by an Astor, William K. Vanderbilt launched his 274-foot yacht Alva a year after 263-foot Norma Hull had been launched. Like Vincent Astor, William Vanderbilt had also served as a naval officer in World War I and spent years designing and building his yacht Alva. And he traded his old yacht with a Miami Beach developer named Fisher and took over Fisher's Island, where he also built a seaplane base. And the Alva also could accommodate a twin-engine seaplane. He and his wife immediately set off on a 7-month circumnavigation. There were 5 guests on board and 151 crew, which included a film crew and marine scientists. The vessel was outfitted to a style and comfort level that the Vanderbilts were accustomed to. Vanderbilt, as an experienced naval officer, did the navigation and commanded the vessel from the bridge himself. During the 7-month voyage, he was able to stay in touch with his New York offices and run his business empire, thanks to his radio room, which was equipped with the latest technology. His multiple scientific expeditions not only filled his own marine museum, but were shared with many other institutions. A month after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Vanderbilt gave the Alva to the U.S. Navy, and she was converted into a gunboat. Evening of August 5th, 1943, the Alva was escorting a ship convoy 120 miles southeast of Cape Henry, Virginia. Their underwater sonar detected a movement, and just as the ship swung left to bear on the target, she was struck just abaft of the bridge. The ship took a heavy list to port just as the entire port side forward of amidships burst into flames. She sank within 2 minutes. Of the 179 officers and crew on board, only 84 survived. And that wraps up part 2 in this series on the history of expedition yachts. There's a lot of material there. I'm going to have to go back, I think, and just do segments on these individual yachts. I learned so much doing this little bit of research that I didn't know about these vessels. We're going to move on to part 3, which is the expedition yachts, which are primarily conversions that were done probably in the 80s and 90s, and they were using commercial vessels that were built in the 60s, 70s, and sometimes 80s. And this is a more recent generation of expedition yachts. Most of these vessels are still in service, and they're highly sought after in the charter market and hold their value very well in the expedition brokerage market. I look forward to seeing you for part 3 and hope that you will join me then.